Hello, everybody. My name is Regina Marks, and you're on Regina's Corner. We have another amazing guest, someone who I've grown to admire so much, Dr. Julia Hum. I was getting ready to say it, like practice it. I was practicing it and I almost had it, so I
You got
remember
it.
Hum.
Just like
Great.
humming a song.
All right. And as you all know who've watched Regina's Corner, I really love to be authentic and I love stories that inspire and give information. Our title to this encounter today on Regina's Corner, and I'm going to make sure I read it to you guys. I was looking. When a learning disability makes all the difference. And just with that, I want to know how it makes all the difference. And I know you do too. You may be suffering from a disability, and I hope today that you're inspired. Julia, can you please introduce yourself, say what you do, and tell us about your disability that you want to talk about today?
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me, Regina.
Thank
And
you.
it's been so wonderful to get caught up to speed with all the great videos you've put out in
Oh,
Regina's
thank you.
Corner.
Thank
So I'm
you.
I'm absolutely flattered that you asked me to join you here. That's so kind. And just humbled by the invitation. So thanks for giving me space to share my story. And so, as Regina said, my name is Julia Hum. Regina and I met each other through work. I'm an assistant professor of physiology at Marian University, and I actually grew up mostly in Indianapolis, and so I feel very fortunate to have made my professional life here too. And let's see, I'm married to my husband of almost 14 years. We were college sweethearts, yep, and we have four wonderful children that keep us busy every day, but it's a wonderful
Oh,
chaos that we
yes.
enjoy. They are 8 and under, so
Oh, yes.
yes, they keep us on our toes. And I've been working at Marian now for this will be my sixth academic year.
Okay.
Um, and it's not my first being hired at Marian University. It was not my first exposure to Marian actually. That came back in the summer of 1991 when I was 6 years old and I was newly diagnosed with dyslexia, and my parents enrolled me in a summer camp through the Dyslexia Institute of Indiana, DII. Holds a summer camp, day camp every year. And I had the good fortune of attending for a few summers, and ironically, it was actually on what was Marian College, now Marian University.
Oh,
It was held in the Stokely Mansion, which, as Regina and I both know, is just right next door to our place of work here at Marian University. So life has a very funny way of coming full circle,
yes.
and my story is no exception in that, because that was really a pivotal summer in my childhood. I started first grade and knew I loved recess time. I loved my friends. I loved drawing. But gosh darn, as soon as they started teaching lessons, I was just lost. My mom identified it pretty quickly. She has an education background.
Okay.
And so I was formally diagnosed with the learning disability dyslexia at the St. Mary's Childhood Center, which is in downtown Indianapolis. And, at the time, this was 1991, they kind of gave my parents kind of a wide spectrum. They're like, Julia is this battery of tests that we did. It shows that she is highly intelligent. Her IQ is quite high, but functionally, in a classroom,
Yeah.
she's falling further and further behind
Mhm.
because her brain really just works differently. And I think the probably the most common misconception that when I do share that I have dyslexia is, oh wow, do you see things backwards? Do you see things? And I was like, well, I was like, it's more of a processing. My vision is fine. I don't require glasses or anything, but it's our eyes intake information, our brain processes, and then it comes, might come back out, through auditory. But it's somewhere in that processing, we know, with dyslexia. So it's nothing wrong with the eyes, nothing wrong with the speech. it's the processing that gets disrupted, and then that's where you perceive or get confused with numbers or letters and whatnot. Fortunately, there's a wonderful tutoring system called the Orton Gillingham system, which is a multi-sensory approach for children with learning disabilities, because usually people with learning disabilities, particularly dyslexia, tend to be bright people. They can learn using that multi-sensory approach. And that's really what Camp Delafield, which is where the summer camp that I went to for a few years at Marion, specialized in. Part of the time was your traditional day camp with water balloons and swimming and tag and capture the flag,
Yeah.
and then the other part of the day was daily tutoring from these Orton Gillingham trained tutors, and that helped keep me on grade level over the summer, because we always know there's a little bit of summer slide with all
Right.
students.
Right.
And so that was really a time to kind of double down the efforts academically. I also was very fortunate to go to a school that had a resource teacher that I had one-on-one instruction in the language arts. So I was very fortunate that early intervention, really affected positively my, learning trajectory. The other big takeaway for me, although it wasn't always talked about at camp, but it was very clear, is that here were 60 some odd other kids from across central Indiana at this summer camp, and while we all like to put on fake tattoos and face paint and all the fun
Right.
things that we do
Yeah.
at summer camp, we
Yeah.
all have that common trait of dyslexia. And so there wasn't this overwhelming feeling of like, oh my gosh, I'm the only one. Um, it was a very positive environment, and even some of the camp counselors had dyslexia, and so you kind of had a role model built in, and so that led me to understand that I was not the only one, and that sometimes I'm going to have to be my own advocate,
Right.
and whether that means extended time, on exams, which was on my IEP, so the individualized education plan, which is basically the federal assurance that if you're diagnosed with a learning disability, you are entitled to things to level the playing field. Sometimes that involves a quiet environment. I don't experience attention deficit disorder, but there are many people who that can go hand in hand.
Okay.
And so it wasn't so much for me that I needed a quiet environment. I didn't have trouble focusing, but I am a slower reader. And so having that time and a half on an exam is a way to level the playing field for someone that just intakes the information much slower. But what I found is when I do intake that information and I synthesize it, and it's something that I really am passionate about, I tend to remember it pretty well,
Okay.
and tend to be able to explain it fairly well too, which is what then led me down the path to my current position. I had been told since I was pretty young, they're like, Julia, you're going to be a teacher. You're going to be a teacher. And I think there's part of, I'm stubborn enough that I heard that so often when I was little. I was like, gosh darn it, everyone thinks they're going to be a teacher. I just don't see that. But it took years down the road, and going through college to where I was like, you know what? If I could teach college students, I think that would be a level I'd really enjoy.
Hmm.
And so that eventually then sent me on the path to graduate school. Um, Knowing that I wanted to I thought teach undergrad. That was really the only, experience I thought, well, it's small enough that I think I'd really enjoy that. And then opportunity knocked on the door at a master's program here at Marion University, and it's been a wonderful blessing. But I have to admit, for the first few years, I did not share with colleagues, coworkers, or our students
Right.
that I learned differently. And that was really something that I think it's important to use the word learning disability and put
Absolutely.
name on dyslexia. But
Hmm.
I've really come to accept that it's really just for me, it's a learning difference. I just learn differently,
Absolutely.
but that doesn't limit my capacity to learn nor share that with others. And I feel like that, there are gifts, just like, seeing a little girl in first grade fall further and further behind. You wouldn't necessarily think, you're like, well, that's probably not the brightest child. But actually, once you uncover that this student just learns differently, they have limitless potential. And I've been fortunate through some confidence and just some time of being at Marian and getting to know my colleagues and our students well. It's something that I now openly share at the beginning of every course when we start talking about, our syllabus and what our goals are for the semester. I tend to mention in there about our accommodations, for students that qualify for accommodations, be it attention deficit disorder or a learning disability. I then identify, say, I know how important these accommodations are. It's very important to me that if you qualify for these accommodations, that you use them. And then I just briefly share that I am dyslexic, and I've been fortunate to have help since I was in first grade. Ironically, I also teach pharmacology, which, if you've seen drug names, some of them are about this big,
Right.
and it have a lot of vowels mixed in between.
Yes,
And I
yes.
really, the first few years, really struggled. I'm a trained physiologist, so how the body works. But we have a course here where we teach physiology and pharmacology together. So
Yes.
how an organ works, and then how drugs work on that organ. And I really struggled with pronouncing, some of these really significantly long drug names.
Yes.
And it wasn't till I, started opening up about with the students that, hey, I get extended time on my exams. I experience dyslexia. I actually started putting in the lectures the phonetic spelling, at least the first time where the drug name appeared. And I told our students, I was like, this is for both of our benefits. I was like, mine as someone that has trouble pronouncing long words and is not, a pharmacologist or a pharmacist. But also, hopefully, it will help you as we do learning activities where you're going to have to be in conversation and talk about these drugs. It'll give you a reference point of how to pronounce them. And so that's been kind of a more recent example of how being, very vulnerable and open with our students, and really pulling back the curtain that, yeah, no, school didn't always come easy to me. I just pursued my passion, and this is what I've learned about myself. And through now opening it up and sharing, my story with others, it's one of those things, like a lot of people say, I wish I would have done it sooner. But it's that kind of that little bit of fear and self-preservation, that imposter syndrome. Am I really good enough to do this job? I don't want to have anything come off as a weakness. Yet
Yes.
every time I would flub, a drug name, I would just be like, oh my gosh, like, I wish they really knew why I was having trouble with this. It's not just because, I'm just not good at pronouncing it. These letters, just, I can't even see the syllables because there's so many vowels in there.
Right.
And now so it's been about 3 years that I've been sharing with our students about my experience learning differently, and at least 2 to 3 every semester, usually in one-on-one meetings, share either how impactful that was to hear that on the first day of class, or that they themselves, qualify for accommodations, and how helpful it was to hear that someone that's leading the class has had that similar experience. So I think the reason I suggested that title to you was, that my learning disability has really made the biggest difference in my life. That there has been way more positive. The people I've encountered through tutors and camp counselors and teachers has really just enriched my life more than anything else. And so, while yes, it is a learning disability, it really has made all the difference in my life. And I hope that it can help by sharing that story, help others.
Yes.
But I must acknowledge, I came from a family who had someone in, one of my caretakers. My mother, is trained in the education field, and
Mhm.
so I was very fortunate that she recognized that pretty early.
Mhm.
Um, there are a lot of brilliant students out there who, for one reason or another, they don't know they have a learning disability, and I think that really just shows their brilliance in being able to figure out ways to keep passing classes, keep advancing in the education system, despite not receiving the accommodations that they should.
Yes. So I have a couple of questions for you, Julia.
Certainly.
One is what we in the medical field always say symptoms. So I want to say, what are the things that a family member or guardian or whoever may be taking care of this child that may have a disability? What are some of the things that they can look for with this particular disability?
Sure, and I think it's a kind of one of the telltale signs is you're dealing with a student who you could probably tell they have passion and they about something, whether it be basketball or art or something like that. You can tell that they're bright people, they're bright children, in particular. And sometimes we could be talking about adults, right? We'll start with children, but bright children, but when they get in a what I would call more of a traditional classroom setting, they're more withdrawn. And kind of the standards with which they are assessed, oftentimes, when I was little, it was the I step, but I know there's other tests now. I mean, I would miserably fail those before I received accommodations. And yet, if you talk to me, just had a conversation with a little first grader, you would say, well, I just don't understand this. She's a little
Yes.
precocious, little
Yes.
first grader who, seems to be enjoys anything athletic related. But, you put a pencil in her hand and you try to get her to do a timed math test, and she might get through two problems when her peers are getting through 10 or 15, right? It's that kind of disconnect where you can tell that they have a lot of gifts and talents, but it's not translating at all in a traditional classroom setting.
What can the guardian or parents do from that point if they do say, I think something's going on? Who do they reach out to? How can they find
Right.
out?
Yeah, so the best thing anyone can do is advocate and ask questions, right? And I know my parents had to be my first advocates till I learned how to advocate for myself. And the first thing would be to meet with that child's teacher and request an evaluation be done. And whether that's a public or a private school, all of them have access to evaluations to test for learning disabilities. In some states, it's standard. I
Okay.
think Indiana's getting there. I haven't looked at the most recent legislature, but screening for dyslexia, I really hope. Again, it might have just changed, but I know
Okay.
they were considering making it a state standard to
Okay.
screen for dyslexia. I believe it's first or second grade,
Okay.
which would be wonderful because then we would catch those students in a prime time of their educational career to make those accommodations that can make all the difference. Um, and so I actually would need to do my own homework to see if that is now standardized. But there's states
Okay.
all around us where
Okay.
screening for dyslexia is standard in the primary grades.
Okay. Awesome. Can the guardian or the parent take their child to their physician, to the
That
healthcare provider? Is that another way?
Sure. I actually remember it was more of that like differential diagnosis. I went to my optometrist, to make sure that it wasn't a vision thing, right? You need to rule out other
Yes.
things.
Yes.
It could very well be they have astigmatism and they just need
Absolutely.
corrective lenses, right?
Absolutely. Yes.
Or it has nothing to do with the way their brain processes information.
Right.
And so, yeah, certainly physicians would rule out and probably then recommend follow-up testing, psychological testing, and really kind of the key indices of dyslexia are really that it's a battery of tests, but one of them being IQ. and usually it's going to outpace their peer group. The IQ is going to be higher, but you ask them to do traditional, vocabulary, mathematics at that age-appropriate level, and that's where they can't convey that high IQ.
Okay.
That
Okay.
disconnect shows.
As I'm listening to you, I'm glad that you actually recommended the title, because as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking about someone could be listening to this, but their disability could be different.
Right,
And
right.
actually, so learning what makes all the difference is that it's okay to share with someone, and any parents or guardian that may be listening, to watch out for those different things that you're, like what you
Mm-hmm.
just said. I noticed that they play the piano very well, or I noticed that they love this game, or I noticed that they love to knit, or whatever that
That
they
they're
may have
clearly
a passion
talented.
for.
Yes, yeah.
Absolutely. But something is wrong, and
Mhm,
so we just want to encourage that guardian or that parent
mhm.
to go ahead and get them tested to find out what's going on, so that they can reach their goal.
Mhm.
In this, I would like to share something briefly. Our second son, he is going to be 40 this year, 40 years old. And he was born with two holes in the upper and lower chambers of his heart. So back
Wow.
then, they did not know what they know
Mhm.
now. So he was
Mhm.
sent home after he was
Oh,
born.
oh
Right.
my.
Right. They didn't know that. Hospital was great. And he
Mhm.
had an appointment at the Children's Hospital here in Indianapolis. I don't mind saying Riley. They were amazing. He was 6 days old.
Oh.
And when he got there, the cardiologists came, and the surgeons, and they got on, believe it or not, they got on their knees to draw me a normal heart, and then
Oh.
draw me our son, Kevin's heart. And I busted
Mhm.
into tears. They took the
Mm.
time. I knew nothing about what I know now about the procedure. And so, make a long story short, of course, he's here, and we did a lot of things with him to reassure. I think that sometimes when kids, and you helped me, Julia, with this, my experience was he dealt with low self-esteem, because he,
Mhm.
after the surgery, because his heart was so enlarged, he had what we call, I don't know if that's name has changed, but
Mhm.
pigeon breast. So it stuck out like
Really?
this outside of his. So he had to go to
Wow.
school, and then he had the long scar, and he had two
Mhm.
surgeries, by the way, one when he was 6 days old, and one when he was 1 years old.
Oh,
And
wow.
so all is, they did a cartilage repair, they put VSD band-aids, patched the holes, went back in to then take off the VSD band-aid, and just to make that in layman's terms, the blood was not flowing to my son's arteries.
Wow.
The heart pumps, just to make that simple, and it goes where it needs supposed to get, where it's supposed to go, where it couldn't travel to my
Mhm.
son's legs. And so it kept going back other places, like to say, hey, we've got to find some place. And actually, it's a miracle, because they said they couldn't understand why the blood did not flow back up to his heart and overflow in his lungs. Um,
Wow.
I mean, the pumping the blood and flow up, slow down, Regina, and flowed into his lungs and killed him.
Mm.
So that did not happen. Again, the blood it has to travel. And if a door is blocked, and it says, okay, we got to find way, because we got to keep moving throughout this body. And so it's a miracle that he's not paralyzed either after
Mm.
that long period of time. So when he grew, as he was growing up, and then challenges with school, we had to put him in a private Montessori school.
Mhm.
And you may be listening and say, you may say, well, I can't afford any of this. They have so many programs now
Mhm.
that will assist you in helping your child. I want to say that the main person that will do the assisting is the guardian, the parent,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
letting them know that it's okay. That's why I love the word that you use. So, in other words, you may learn differently.
Mhm.
And sometimes we don't want to label. You may learn differently. And that's what I told Kevin when he says, it's so hard for me. I said, you just learn differently. I want you to know that because of the power of love, being there, being around, he excelled.
Mm.
And by the time he was in high school, he was in a highly intelligent class. and he went on to go to college and is now, and I always get his title wrong, but he lives out of town. He's been at his job for 18 years, and his job is all this high technology stuff that actually, and I said the word stuff, didn't I? Shouldn't have said that, but all this technology that I don't understand. It tests the coal to be
Okay.
sold to the power company. So, but there's a
Yeah.
lot of things that involves, it's very high tech. And so a child can exceed. And I would encourage anyone listening, do all that you can. And
Mhm.
also, wherever that child goes in their level
Mhm.
of intelligence or education, that's okay.
Mhm.
Support
Yep.
them wherever that they may land to be the best that they
Absolutely.
can be, and
Yep.
love themselves, to say it's okay. I may have to do a little extra than someone else, um, but that's okay. It's them feeling good is also very important. That you,
Mhm.
that the child or the preteen or the adult child feel good about themselves, because then they're able to excel in whatever area that
That
they landed.
100%.
Yeah.
You know, when I advise students about, career paths, that I often ask them, I said, tell me some skill sets that you feel like, you're innately good at and
Oh,
would
fantastic.
help set you apart, right?
Yes.
In a
Yes.
career field. Don't tell me a title of what title you want professionally, because that title doesn't matter if you don't feel like you're contributing,
Right.
right? and
Yeah.
and you have something to give that
Mhm.
hopefully at least you're a little bit passionate about. If we
Yes.
can really meet that
Mhm.
intersection of passion and skill set, that's where people feel like what they're doing feels a little bit like a calling to them, because
Yes. I
it
love it.
aligns with what they're innately probably excel
Mhm.
at or can
Yes.
grow into at least,
Right.
but then have a passion for what they're doing.
Yes.
And sometimes when we get so hung up on what the title of jobs are, those can kind of come and go, right? The
Mhm.
titles come and go, but your skill
Absolutely.
set is what you always bring, to
Right.
your career.
Yes.
And that's what can help you advance in whatever
Yes.
field you end up in.
Right. Absolutely. Because we had to find that out. And so, how we found out about our son's passion
Mhm.
was he never really voiced it until we found something one day. I walked in my kitchen and my toaster had been taken apart.
Ah,
I looked and I said, Kevin, why did you take the toaster apart? I didn't scold him or say you shouldn't have done that. I wanted to know why. It was
sure.
open and taken apart. And he
Wow.
says, I wanted to know how it works. I said, it just plugs up.
That was a
He
good
says,
enough answer for
no.
him.
He says, no, mom, I wanted to know how it works. And I thought, what is he going to do?
Oh,
And so we let him do different things, and we bought things that it was okay to take apart. I said, can you put that back together? He says, oh, yes.
wow.
And so now look at what he's doing.
Right. It's one of
But when
those stop you in your tracks observations. And
right,
and that's so true with
absolutely,
having young children and watching their personalities unfold. And some of them are a
absolutely.
little too little to see it yet. But I mean, our second grader, it's very clear that she is kind of our humanities kid, loves the arts, loves
Yeah.
being on stage, at 8 years old. And so we've already said, so for her, she's like Broadway star, right? But I'm like, well,
Okay.
aim for that, honey. But there's lots of roles within theater, not
Tell her
just
she
the.
could come and be a standardized patient for a minute while she
Yeah,
goes on move on.
exactly. Exactly. Oh man, she would love that. You ever need a pediatric one? We would be happy to give
Oh
her a little
my
script
gosh, we
and
got
let
to
her be.
talk.
She would love it. She would love
Oh
it.
my.
We should follow up on that actually. That's
You know what?
a
We should, and let her be able to even come and see some things.
mm-hmm.
So we got
Yeah.
to talk about that.
Yeah.
I
She
think
would love it. Yeah, if you ever
so.
need a precocious second grader to deliver a line to any of
Oh,
our training,
awesome, awesome.
nursing students or medical students, she's your girl.
We have to talk about that. I want to mention before we get ready to say goodbye to our YouTube channel. Passion is to me like an engine.
Mhm.
like a locomotive train. Passion will keep you going. It will keep you searching. Passion is very strong. When you have a passion, then you'll do things. And so I love when you mention that. Find out your passion. I have mentioned that to the medical students. What is your passion? Because that's what you need, and you
Yep.
always want to follow your passion. Because
Yep.
if you're in a place, it's because maybe someone said that, you should be this. You won't have the passion that goes beyond what you'll need to do, beyond that makes you get up and study in the middle of the night when you really want to, but that passion just has you going. It's
Yes.
when you love what you do, it comes through your speaking, it comes through your body. People are able to feel your
Hmm.
passion, and so it will drive you to that place where you need to be. And you may have to work hard. That's what it's about. You may have to work a little extra harder than maybe someone else. It's okay.
Yeah.
Like I
Knowing
said,
that why and having that passion is
right.
what will help get through those difficult times.
Absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
don't think I would have gotten through graduate school and earned my PhD if I didn't at least have an idea of what I thought
Absolutely.
I'd be good at afterwards, or
Right.
why I was doing that. It wasn't just
Right.
more school,
Right.
it was a means to hopefully be a faculty member someday where I am mostly using my skill set as an educator, either in the classroom or in the lab.
Or you definitely doing that. And I love well, you
I'm
are. And I love
so
what you said
fortunate.
about your fears, because I love this may not, I don't know how this will come across to someone, but I love to hear people's stories of how they were right here. So tell me how you got here. I
Mhm.
love to hear about people's fears and how they were afraid, or their difficult times or their storms, but they
Yep.
got through it here,
Yep.
because those stories,
Very
they,
rarely a straight
people
line
want
here.
the real thing. People
Yep.
want the real thing. And when they hear
Absolutely.
what, and they're looking, when you told me, my mouth dropped. I said, really? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because
Very dyslexic.
yes, it's truly a blessing to other people to know that I can do it too. You're doing it. I can do it. I can make it. So
Yeah.
thank you for forgiving of yourself today, that someone may have hope that whatever that their difficulties may be, their challenges may be, that they can too make a difference in somebody's life, even when it's difficult for them, that they can overcome that and then share it with someone else to give them a
Well,
story.
I just thank you again for having me. It's been a pleasure to, carry on this conversation with you,
Gosh,
and
you
if it
too.
helps one other person, or
Yes,
it makes somebody think, you know what? We maybe should follow up on that, then
absolutely.
that's the reason right there.
Yeah, it's worth it to follow up. It's worth it to help that person. It could be a friend of yours. It could be your spouse. It could be a child. Could be a teenager. Whoever that it is to help them. It's worth it. It's worth it to say, "Hey, let's get some help." You can do
Absolutely.
this. What's your passion? Okay, we're gonna get there. We're gonna make it. Thank you,
Thank you so
Julia,
much,
so much
Regina.
again. And I'll tell you all about, we're in the Smoky Mountains, and everybody YouTube and having a blast. But I also wanted to keep this appointment with Julia and hear her amazing story. So
What
thank you
dedication.
again. What'd you say?
I said, what dedication.
Oh, this is my passion, and I've said it before, and I'm not sure that, yeah, it's my passion. Um, I love, and I think that I actually, I'm always encouraging the students. And there's
Mhm.
times when I talk to the students before they get ready to go into OSCEs, and it's a lot
Mhm.
of pressure. They're under camera. And I always will give them something inspirational, because it was done to me.
Mhm.
I love to inspire. And this is why I do Regina's Corner, because guess what? It comes back to me. I'm
Mhm.
inspired when I listen. And so Regina's Corner is about information, and also encouragement and inspiring and education. So someone just got educated today on what to do because of you, Julia.
Oh, thank you so much, Regina.
Thank you. Everybody, don't forget to subscribe and hit like. Please comment if you have any questions. I'll make sure that Julia gets those questions, and we'll go from there. Again, we'll see you next time on Regina's Corner. Thank you so much, Julia. I'll see you soon next week.
See you. Safe
Ah,
travel.
thank you so much. Bye bye.